The goal of the community broker strategy is to highlight the contributions of racialized communities and facilitate that voice in making changes at the individual and family level, at the community level, and at the service systems and public policy level. This community broker strategy uses a community development approach. That means you start with people's gifts, potentials, whatever they can give to contribute back to society. That is how the community broker strategy will build the capacity of individuals, racialized communities, to have a voice and have a voice in changing their situations. So it's kind of self-empowering. Our philosophy in community development says that if they're the most impacted, then they have the best ideas on how to solve these issues. They have the best advice that they can give to service providers and to government in relation to public policy change. This is the process of, again, brokering the lived experiences of these communities that are impacted and the policies that are impacting them. So we try to bridge that gap by developing leaders among them. And then as leaders, they have to come up with action ideas. They also inform the service providers, hey, that approach doesn't work for us. This is how we want the services done. This is how we would be welcomed and respected. And that's very important. We need to create an atmosphere of respect for these communities in order for them to be partners in finding solutions. So these community brokers are the connectors in the community. They are the trusted members of the community. They have a large network in the community, and therefore, when they go to the most marginalized, the most isolated, those who don't usually go out, when they go to them, because they are one with them, they belong to that culture, they speak their language, there is that ability to engage, to be listened to mobilize these communities and engage them to find ways of also addressing their issues, but in collaboration with other service providers. So this strategy trains these community brokers who are embedded in these different racialized communities. We provide them with training, we provide them with information, with the skills in organizing and mobilizing that make them effective in engaging these racialized communities. So an example of how the community broker strategy works is on the issue of accessibility of health services. When the Alberta Health Services started to develop their own patient-centered care strategy, we hired 8 different ethnocultural brokers who spoke more than 17 languages. So we trained these community brokers to do participatory action research. So it's a new skill that we gave them. What came out of this was a set of 17 recommendations, which is the development of the Healthcare 101. How do we make the understanding of healthcare and how to navigate the healthcare system, how do we make this accessible to different racialized communities? What is good about this community broker strategy is that it's not a program in itself. It's a strategy that you can embed in different programs. So for example, in our case, we used the community broker strategy in addressing domestic violence prevention.
Afghani community is a new immigrant community to Canada. In the areas of domestic violence and mental health, it's a very stigmatized subject for them. We have already had about maybe 10 sessions with the Afghan community, and one of the broker is an Afghan person who speaks Farsi, right? So what we do is we have a program which is translated into Farsi. The broker himself is able to facilitate in their language. So not only are you building trust with that group, but you are also informing them.
I am part of Greater Forest Lawn Community Connector Initiative. One of the major topics came is there is a high need for food, or for example, mini food bank for them. And we installed now with resident-led 3 pantries in different area. We run a bread program, food drive, pick up donation from different location looking for food items. We talk to them, did you benefit from these pantries? And most likely they said yes, it is really helpful, especially when you meet people who are coming just new to the area, they need a transition resource to do things, or people very low income, they can't keep up with day-to-day like meals.
We worked with Calgary Mental Health Association. They wanted to know how the communities, how the ethnic, the racialized communities turn to them for services, for any issues. Like, you know, are they using it? What are the barriers? We came up with a project. It's like a secret shopper. Person goes there and just pretends to be a customer, right? And sees, you know, everything, you know, from the beginning to end, how they are how they are greeted, how the facility looks. Each brokers were able to bring in 5-10 community members, and those members would go to this to their office, to their location where they provide the services, and ask the questions. So this is a first-hand feedback that we are getting from the community, right, community members. And we consolidated all that information, and we had a one-on-one meeting with the service provider. And some of the changes, they said, yeah, we're going to implement these changes tomorrow.
The evidence that lets us know that this is an innovative and forward-thinking strategy, one of the biggest things is participation. The ability to get people to participate in events and conversations, community actions, especially around taboo topics. As an example, over the last while, Action Dignity held a Home and Hearts Festival, which was related to domestic violence prevention, and brought out 300 people to that event. They held an activity around equity in the federal election, and were able to mobilize 80 people to come out to that event. Time and time again, they're mobilizing a lot of people to come out to events that community members might not really feel comfortable coming to or feel interested even. And not only that they're coming out the first time, but we see them coming back. It's different than recruiting, sending out a flyer, walking around with business cards, putting out posters. This is a very personal kind of relationship building that lets people get involved in activities that are outside of their comfort zone.
You will find, for example, community members who are even scared to move one step to do something for themselves. So here, the community broker gently gives them a gentle push that you are capable to do things, and the moment they feel this motivation, and the moment they feel they are capable and they have lots of talents and skills, the moment they believe in us. So I believe when you connect people, it is not only connecting people with resource, taking this person to tell them the resources over there, it is uniting people. We empower them and we create leaders from the community. Imagine when you empowered one person, and this person empowered his family, his own family, and the family empowered the society, and then the entire society is improved. Just with one broker initiative going out and reach out for those people.
Because the community broker strategy isn't a program itself, it's a strategy that's embedded across programs. Each program has its own evaluation tools according to what's relevant for the program or funder requirements. But very common are things like surveys. So those would be pre-training or pre-event surveys, particularly for brokers as they enter the program, to see what is their confidence, what is their skill level, what's their information that they have. And then post-training surveys to see what the difference is. And not only post-training, but post-work. So the training is designed to be a learning, action, reflection, learning, action, reflection. So there may be a survey after the training session, but then the brokers go into the community and actually do some of the work, so there'll be another survey after that to see how has this process been for you? Was the training you received sufficient to set you up for this kind of work? What do you wish you had known at the start before you started doing this work, because it helps us to improve the training for them. They also use surveys with community members, and those tend to be post-event surveys to see how they were impacted by it. Focus groups are a really common method we use with brokers themselves to see what the impact is of their training and their work experience and what they're learning from their communities, and also focus groups with participants. We also use rapid check-in interviews, I'll call them, with stakeholders, with service providers that we work with, asking, is it working well? Is the process working well? Are you getting the results you need? Are there any challenges arising that we should be addressing? We can harvest some of the information about the broker strategy from each of the program reports that are being sent to funders. But there's also another level of performance measurement that happens across programs, because we want to understand the strategy from an agency-wide perspective. And that kind of performance measurement tends to be more in the form of outcomes harvesting, reflection sessions. So we would have sessions with brokers themselves to bring them together across programs and find out what are the most significant things that are happening in communities from your work? What are the most significant things that are impacting you? What can we do better? What do we need to learn from? And also with staff who supervise the brokers themselves, we would have separate sessions with them also. For community brokers, what our evaluation tools have told us is that the training is really crucial for them. They report things like, obviously, increased knowledge on specific issues. That may be the issues that they're working with within their programs, whether it's domestic violence or mental health, but also knowledge and skill development in terms of community development skills. That's things like conversation starters to outreach strategies, making people feel welcome, group rules for sessions, increased confidence in taking on leadership roles is something we hear a lot from brokers. And that comes not from their training, but from their work in their community after they've been involved in taking on projects. Also, brokers report that they, sometimes for the first time, have had the chance to advocate and connect with decision makers, whether they're in service organizations or in government positions. The sense of power, really, that gives them, and confidence that change is possible, is something that's very empowering and motivates them to continue working with their community. For the individuals and families that the brokers are working with, a lot of what we hear relates to, for sure, new knowledge on the topics that are being talked about, comfort with issues that they weren't comfortable talking about before. We see that they're more connected to community events, so where they were isolated before, now they're aware of and involved in activities that are happening in their neighborhoods. We hear them saying that they're aware of their rights. They didn't know somebody would listen to them before. They didn't know that they had a right to give feedback. For example, if a service isn't appropriate for them or they're not getting what they need, that they have a right to share that information and that they could influence some kind of change from it. We hear from individuals and families that they're finding leadership in themselves. So where they may have been isolated originally, they're now participating, but not only that, they're encouraging others to get involved, and they're taking on tasks that they didn't think they would feel comfortable taking on before, whether it's help organizing an event, joining a roundtable discussion with a government official. So a sense of having power, really, and that their voice is important. And a sense of belonging, and that the issues that they're facing are not a personal issue. It's not something that they're to blame for, but actually this is a common issue, and that as they get together with other people, they can move from a position of feeling like it's an issue they need to deal with themselves to actually coming up with solution ideas for their community. And then at the systems change level, this is where we're checking in with the service providers we work with and see how has it impacted you to be working with our community brokers and the community members that they're mobilizing. And we hear things like personal connections. I've never even talked to someone before from such and such a community. I didn't know about their experiences. And now as a person, I have that kind of empathy and compassion for that. Awareness of community needs or barriers. And then for government decision makers, it can be really tough to get anyone involved in public consultation, but especially isolated and diverse community members. So we're hearing from government representatives, actually Action Dignity has really become a go-to organization for government officials who want to have input from diverse community members, and they'll contact Action Dignity and say, hey, can we come? Can you organize some people for us? We want to talk about for example, the federal anti-racism strategy, and we need some input. So for them, it's very valuable, the mobilizing capacity that Action Dignity has, which is through its brokers mainly. Community broker work is really complex. They may go out to work on one issue and find out that another issue is important, and then the dynamics that happen in the community require a lot of different skill sets from brokers. So we have constant communication with them to make sure that we can provide the kind of training and support that they need to be able to manage those situations, and to work with communities as they go through that journey of identifying issues and looking for actions they can work on. It's a growing process for everyone. One of the most important things about the broker's work is that they're not bound to the office, and they do their work at all kinds of hours and during their normal daily life, whether they're out grocery shopping or at a place of worship or riding the train. So we have them submit timesheets and write monthly reports. As an organization, communicating to our partners, reminding them of some of the boundaries. For example, someone might say, you know, could your brokers just raise awareness of our event we have coming up and help recruit something? So sometimes we need to raise awareness of the intensity of that recruitment. In many communities, it's not as easy as just picking up the phone and saying, hey, do you want to come Saturday? There's a lot more relationship building that happens, exploring the issue first so people feel comfortable with the issue. So it can be a lot of hours just to get someone to an event. So sometimes we just have to raise that awareness with our partners and work with our brokers on self-care also, so that they have a sense of, you know, how much is too much for them and what are they able to do.
Community brokers used to be seen as volunteers, even if they spend like past midnight or early in the morning or weekends. They were never paid. But we were able to advocate for these brokers to be paid, to be given their telephone allowance because they use their own cell phones, transportation allowance because they go around and use their own cars, and also be covered by workers' compensation benefit because they do a lot of important work in the communities. The community broker strategy can be embedded in different programs. It could be applied to the disability sector. It could be applied to the LGBTQ. It could be applied to the residents of a neighborhood. I think just a word of caution is it will always have to start with the cultural beliefs, traditions, and the particularities of that certain population. It has to come from someone who has the lived experience and people can identify with. What would limit the transferability of this community broker strategy is to be fixated in one area of work, in one issue, in one service provision, or in one public institution. No, because all the different issues are interrelated. You cannot talk about mental health without talking about poverty, without talking about discrimination, without talking about domestic violence prevention. So these issues are not in silos. If we really want to address big level changes, these all have to be seen in a holistic and an integrated way. And that's what community broker strategy is all about. It knows no boundaries. It is very collaborative, and it's very respectful of the role of communities. It's based on the philosophy of mutually beneficial and equitable relationship towards a common goal of building a more inclusive, equitable society.